Getting a look at the baby amberlinks. We got 4 of them. Oh, cute. They're so cute. 4 of them. I think Marley, chicken coop done? Let's check it out. What's up, YouTube? Welcome to my backyard chicken video. This is my first time raising chickens or building a chicken coop, so I'm not an expert. This is just a video of my experience and how I did things. I'll be talking about raising them from chicks for just a little bit, and then I will be breaking down the time lapse of the chicken coop build in more detail at the end of this video. So if you're looking for chicken coop build ideas, you can skip forward to the build chapter. With that being said, enjoy the video.
Ready. Go. Bring it. Bring it.
So you want chickens and you want fresh eggs. What do? Well, you start out by cruising for chicks, of course. I shopped around town at a few places that had chicks and decided to go for an all-around breed known as the Amber Link. It's a meaty bird with a very high egg-laying count. They have a medium temperament, meaning they don't really mind being picked up and cuddled, but also aren't known as being very affectionate. They lay almost 300 eggs a year, so between the 4 of them, I'm averaging 3 eggs a day right now, which is outstanding. I love eggs, and that was the main reason why I started this project. So, starting out, I kept them in this Rubbermaid container. I bought a heat lamp from the hardware store and a heat bulb, and I picked up some starter chick feed and some straw bedding. Pretty simple to get started. I kept them by my bed the first week or so just to make sure Tiger Claw didn't get any bright ideas about a yummy little Tweety bird snack, and to make sure I could keep them safe. This setup didn't last long though, as they grew so fast they were able to just hop out after a couple weeks. Also starting out, I just had these bowls of food and water, but quickly learned my feeders are so important. Long story short, they crap all over everything. Within a few hours of changing their water, it was already all pooped up. I messed around with a couple DIY feeders that worked okay. There was plenty of videos on how to do so, but eventually I just bought feeders from the store. They were less than $15 a piece, and it really simplifies things. So pretty simple so far. Easier than I expected, actually. The only problem I ran into that is common is you have to keep their butts clean when they are this little. So once a day I would take them and just run their little butts under the faucet and wipe clean with the Q-tip. Besides that, just keep them fed and watered and keep them under a heat lamp and they are good to go. As you can see, they're getting bigger now, looking like little raptors devouring what's left of this compost maggot box I made. Basically, once they were too big for the Rubbermaid, I transferred them into this rabbit hutch that my amazing landlord had laying around. I then used the Rubbermaid container to make a compost box, and I put scraps of food out there as to create maggots for them. They love them. After it warmed up enough to put them outside, I moved the hutch into the yard, and I just used a tarp to cover up the hutch up whenever the weather was bad. This worked out great and was a lasting solution all the way until the coop was done. And because they basically grew up in that hutch, you'll see in the build video, I incorporated it into the build so they would feel even more at home in their new home. To be honest, I procrastinated quite a bit this summer on the coop build. They were just fine in their caged off area with their hutch to sleep in at night, and focusing on other projects and going camping and fishing and also dealing with car problems ended up taking a lot of my attention. But they're pretty much full grown now and they're already laying eggs. It's starting to cool down and it's definitely time to get this coop done. So let's get into the build. Starting off here, breaking ground on the project basically, you can see what my yard looks like before we got started. You can also see that my fence stops where the tarp is. After consulting with my landlord about the chicken project, she has been totally amazing and gave me permission and materials to effectively double my yard space to make this project happen. Super big shout out and big thank you to Deanna for making this project possible. Thank you so much. As you can see, this entire cage-offed area was created. It actually only took 1 day with the help of 2 of my buddies. Thank you so much, Sean and Tybus, for the outstanding help. And I am super bummed I didn't get the cage build on time-lapse. We did the whole cage in a day. I had the camera set up, and though it was running all day, I went back to check the footage afterwards, and I never pressed play or something. It would have been an awesome time-lapse, but That's okay, I'll do my best to explain really quickly how we did it. The biggest challenge was that Deanna wasn't 100% sure on where the lines were buried, so she asked that we not dig any holes. So the whole structure had to be freestanding. No problem whatsoever, given that she had tons of chain link laying around I could use as well as these 4x4s and these 2x12s. There was 2 sections of framed in fencing we put on either side right here, and so that was the base. Then we basically just started wrapping 4-foot wide pieces of chain link over the top and on the sides. Super classy with the clay K, we tied it in all together with zip ties and paracord. Chickens don't care, right? Using these 4x4s as supports and making this big base in the middle, we were able to get it all wrapped in a day. It may look kinda ghetto, but for $0 out of my pocket and essentially doubling my yard space, I couldn't be any happier. Thanks again, Deanna. Getting started on the base here, I can honestly say that probably one of the most important aspects for how I chose to do things was pallet selection. I got a hold of these already decked in pallets that had no gaps in between on the main side, so they would act as a perfect deck and base. This was crucial. I could only find 4 of these, so they were to be used as the base and 2 main walls. The plan changes a little bit as the build goes on, but driving around the back of the big box stores looking for the perfect pallets paid dividends and made this build as simple as possible. I used scraps of the 2x12s and slid them in the underside and just screw them in from the top of the deck to adjoin these 2 pallets. Then I measured and cut legs from the 4x4s and flipped this over, and ta-da! Step 1 done. Like I said, I procrastinated quite a bit before I got back to this project after step 1, so I had to hoe away the chicken nuggets before I could get started again. Don't worry, it doesn't go to waste. I put the chicken poo in my plants, and I think that's why my tomatoes have grown taller than the cage this year. Great fertilizer. I moved the base closer to the main support because I want it all to be connected and weighed down by the coop, because like I said, this is a freestanding structure, and this will help to better anchor everything. I go ahead and screw the first sidewall into the main support. The next thing I want to do before I go any further is I want to put down some kind of flooring, for lack of a better term. Something like linoleum scraps is what I had in mind originally, but I just couldn't get a hold of any. I settled for this heavyweight fabric with a slick plastic-like surface that is pretty much similar to linoleum, but way cheaper. It was like $10 for this size of piece, so not too bad. This will make cleaning the coop so much easier. When it's time to clean the coop, everything will just slide right out. I just used roofing nails and nailed it right to the deck. No big deal. I also picked up this fresh strand of chicken wire. It's the same width as one section of one pallet. I think this was another very crucial choice I made. Although there was scraps of chicken wire available on the property I could have used for this, having something brand new that is the exact width as what I need already, that is easy to work with and unspool, probably saved me a lot of time and effort versus using scraps to do this portion. I want to stick the inside of the pallet with straw and keep it contained inside with the chicken wire. This is for 2 reasons. One, most obvious, is insulation. It does get fairly cold here in the winter and I want them to have a warm house, obviously, but also number 2 is after doing a lot of pallet chicken coop videos, or watching them I mean, one problem I saw is if you leave the pallets bare on the inside, the chickens will climb on the rungs of the pallets and crap all over it, and it makes it really hard to clean. I only want them crapping on my linoleum fabric, and that's why I put it in there. So what I'm doing here is I'm starting on one end using roofing nails. I'm tacking the chicken wire in place until about 3/4 of one section is nailed in. Then I stuff it with straw. Then I tack up the rest of the section. Then I trim off the excess with tin snips. Rinse and repeat. I do a lot of this throughout this build, and it's probably the most tedious aspects of this design. As I'm doing some of this tedious work, I'm also contemplating how I want the roof to be. I have little to no carpentry experience. I'm sure if you're a carpenter, you're gonna have a million better ways to do this, but I'm just winging it here. I know I want it slanted for rain. I know I'm going to have tin on top, but figuring out the slope and how to arrange the pallets was kind of messing with me. I could see it in my mind, but still wasn't quite sure how I was gonna pull it off. In the end, as you can see here, I opt for the chainsaw. Hey, if you can't finesse it, force it, right? So I decided to take one section off the top of the pallets on the sides and the right main wall. I'm still not 100% sure how it's coming together yet, but I do know I want a slant, so I said screw it. Take off one section. You'll have a 2x4 on top now to work with, and that's about a 6 inches of slant, so just do it. This right side wall is where it gets pretty tricky also, because I know I definitely want a door/access panel that can be removed to make cleaning and changing their food and water super easy. I plan on having 3 trusses for the roof, so there needs to be a wall with 2 trusses, then the door, then another wall with 1 truss. So I measured out the pallet pieces I want and I cut them with the chainsaw. Again, I'm just winging it. I took a lot of breaks and kept looking at it, kept using my tape measure, and just made it happen. It's important to note here also that definitely not all pallets are the same. You can see how the main wall on the left has completely different dimensions than the rest. This is why originally I was going to have one of these big decked in pallets as 2 main walls. That would be half of the base, as I combined 2 of these end to end to make the foundation, because these 4 pallets were longer than all the rest. But as the build went on and I was making modifications for the door and the roof, the big pallet wouldn't have worked. I was constantly walking back and forth with my tape measure to my stack of pallets, checking to see what would work best. I had accumulated maybe 15 pallets of different shapes and sizes. I tried to get mostly the same across the board, but also I wanted a variety for that exact reason, in case I needed a different size as far as the spacing of the 2x4s that hold the pallet together. That way, I could just cut off what I needed without having to rip pallets apart or do any real framing. It's also important to note that you make sure you're not getting pallets that can be toxic to your chickens. If they're blue or a weird color or looks like they've been treated, it's usually a no-go. So at this point, I've got 1 truss in and also the connecting wall on the right side. The way I did the truss was I actually tacked on one of the 2x12s up on the outside of the coop at the angle that I wanted. Then I just basically stenciled and marked off around the frame where it was going to sit from one end to the other. Hindsight being 2020, I could have just used cardboard or something to make a stencil, because getting that 2x12 up there at the right angle just to draw lines on it and remove it was kind of a pain, but we got her done. There was a lot of trial and error here for the trusses, especially because after I cut the first one, I realized my 2 walls on the left weren't flush, so I had to bring the left side in and reinforce it with the 2x4, which of course then made my truss not fit anymore, so I had to make more cuts to get it to fit again, but I knew I was going to be stuffing it all up with straw anyway, so it didn't have to be perfect. After 1 truss was cut, I used it as a stencil to make 2 more. And I got everything on the right side dry fit and ready to be installed. I ran another board under the truss on the right side along the right wall, effectively joining the 2 walls together on the right side and leaving a framed in gap for my access panel. Once the 2 walls were in and connected by the board on top, I made little cuts in my door until it fit nice and snug. I was originally going to use a hinge, but I was able to make little cuts with my chainsaw to shave it down just enough so it fits in perfectly. I secure the 2 trusses and right wall by basically just screwing everything together. Trusses to pallets, trusses to the main 4x4, 4x4s to the pallets. Basically anywhere anything touches, I just use my impact drill and long screws and just stick it all together. The next thing I want to do before I go any further is prep and dry fit the rabbit hutch. I took measurements before I started and I knew it was pretty much a perfect fit already, but I need to get an idea for exactly where everything's going to fit and where it's going to sit before I go any further. I cut the legs off the hutch and I removed the cage on one end, and making sure it's all going to slide right in, I can move on to the next phase. Now that I have 2 trusses in, I run 2 lengths of 1x2 perpendicular on top of them, giving me a place to attach the roof to. Insulating the roof is a big priority and probably the easiest portion of insulation on the build. I just tack up some chicken wire halfway up the trusses and make a nice little nest for the straw to sit in. Then I stuff it, followed by measuring and cutting a section of roofing and screwing it in. So, now that I know everything fits on the right side with the roof installed, I go ahead and insulate my access panel, as well as the walls on the right side, and I go to work on insulating the hutch. Insulating the hutch was probably the biggest pain in the whole build. Getting inside this thing and trying to swing a hammer enough to tack down chicken wire, it was so frustrating. But I was so close to being done, I couldn't stop now. I get the hutch all insulated finally, and I get it slid into where I want it. Then basically I just stuff the crap out of all the gaps with more straw. I add in chicken wire over the 3rd truss that's over the hutch, and stuff it and insulate it on each side. I extend the roof and insulate it, rinse and repeat, insulate chicken wire straw, and then at the end I add supports to the end of the roof above the hutch, and that's pretty much it. As we do a little tour around the finished product, if you're still here, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you learned something or enjoyed the video, go ahead and put your thumb on that like button real quick. If you have any comments or suggestions about the build, I'd love to hear them. I hope that if you're here doing research about owning chickens, that this video helps. I really do. It's been a very fun and rewarding process, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the finished product having farm fresh organic eggs on demand. It's awesome. Go cruising for chicks, everybody. You won't be disappointed. See ya. Say bye, chickens. Say bye, chickens.